I thought we put a little data to some of the conversations lately. Yesterday, I wasn't able to make videos from my Prime setup, and I appreciate you guys for still even watching those videos. So let's jump into it today with this comment that I saw from an audience member of mine. I made the video about Black Myth Wukong. It sold about 70% in China, 30% outside of China, according to the game's director and co-founder of Game Sciences Studios. So when I talked about it, I said, PC basically carried that game. I mean, if you think about the ratio in terms of sales, yes, the game is based on Chinese myth, and most of its sales, in fact, majority of its sales were in China. Now, I see that whenever we talk about how PC pretty much is this platform that many times has ability to do something quite different, there will always be the detractors. It always is the case. Now, you can detract all you want, but the beauty is the numbers are absolutely there to make sure that you pay attention to it, regardless of what you think or feel. And you'll find out that many times, a lot of our conversations will probably find themselves running to probably scour and maybe dodge what the data is saying. So this audience member wrote and said, Xbox is FEAD, I don't know what they meant to say, and not worth the effort. They were saying this is why the developers did not port the game to Xbox. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that this is basically a fantasy that's been dreamed up in the minds of so-called PlayStation fanboys, that Xbox is not worth the effort in terms of them bringing their game. And then they went ahead and said, PlayStation did not sign any, exclusivity deal. They said, hiding behind what PlayStation has to do with Black Myth Wukong, PlayStation didn't make an exclusivity deal with Wukong, and they chose to skip Xbox because of technical problems. Now, these two statements are very interesting simply because, number one, we have no idea that PlayStation made an exclusivity deal, and we have no idea that PlayStation didn't make an exclusivity deal. What we have are allusions to Xbox saying that they cannot comment on any deals made by their partners, and we have Xbox saying that Game Science has not reached out to them with any technical problems about their game. Now, you have basically made two statements that you have no way of confirming that, in fact, are contradictory in terms of technical problems to themselves. So again, this is not necessarily something about that, but even though the game came out, is sold in China on PC, we did a hypothetical. If the game was a PlayStation exclusive, its sales would have been trash. It's the same and similar thing that happened with Final Fantasy 16 and saw its developers scouring to PC. PlayStation is a third-party box, and I'm going to show you some more data to that effect, hopefully in this video, maybe in another video. You said Wukong would have been a hit in China if it was exclusive to China, and only. So what's your point? My point is that the developers were surprised that outside of China, their game would even do that well, even though the game was written more and designed and developed more to appeal to a Chinese market using deep Chinese philosophical, cultural, and even sociological themes. That's where the conversation is, that they themselves didn't even see that potential, and then it eventually materialized. Hence, the exclusivity in terms of whether it was technical or whether it was PlayStation, we're not really aware fully, is basically something that they probably now have to rethink. Ladies and gentlemen, come on, man. Let's if you had something that maybe did well and you weren't expecting it to do well, and you would basically put yourself in a position where you didn't basically capitalize on the market, if you're thinking from that perspective, then you will realize, oh, wow, this is definitely something that I probably should have, taken a very close look at. So for anybody to say, oh, PC isn't the end all be all, when PlayStation sold literally a fraction compared to PC, come on now, you got to admit, you have a bias against the idea that PC is there. And I love it. I love seeing PlayStation fans actually see a wall that they cannot, posture against. That's the PC platform. That's the pro-consumer Valve renegade, off the cuff, very, very well disconnected from all of the pretty much normatives that console had tried to introduce into the industry that gamers basically railed against. And for the most part, you're seeing it here with this market. You said PC isn't the end all be all for all accessibility, Nvidia ripping everyone off is helping to sell PlayStation 5 in China. Where'd you get this data from? Where'd you get this data from? Where'd you get this claim from? China exclusive games have always brought millions. Where'd you get that data from? The West just wasn't aware of it because those China exclusive PC games didn't come to the West. Which ones? Which ones? Which ones? Because you can actually gain access to many of these games. In fact, to be honest, some Western developers have always known that China is a big market, and so they actually make and market their games to China. Maybe you may be talking about some other gamers who probably aren't aware of this. I played the Division 1 and Division 2. The big, fun thing about the Division in terms of, the way the game is there's actually a Chinese version of the game. And that Chinese version of the game is very different in some areas than the Western version of the game. In fact, some game modes are available on the Chinese version of the game that are not on the Western version of the game, right? Because Ubisoft understands and sees the Chinese market and has been able to go ahead and work some of its games into those ecosystems. But again, there are games within China and there are games within its publishers because, you keep saying things like, PlayStation A, B, C, D, and E, where they don't necessarily, prioritize the PlayStation because if those games were on PlayStation, right, or consoles, you'd see them, right? So how are those games selling millions of copies? I think you've basically obliterated your own argument. Here's the thing. You need to accept the flood, which is the PC market. It's going to come in and it's going to encroach more and more into the console paradigm. Nvidia basically going ahead to make themselves bumbling idiots in their 50 series launch is not anything new. I mean, we've seen hardware launch poorly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not going to be the first time. However, you act like hardware is not available and has not been available for almost a decade now in terms of what you call, appropriate and even relevant hardware. If developers are still running the GTX 1060, a 2016 GPU, as well as older GPUs, and then there's also AMD and Intel, why do you then think that somehow the market is relegated to only Nvidia? Again, showing that you have very minimal knowledge of what the PC gaming market looks like. I recommend, if you're someone who prefers to play on console, take your time and understand the market in terms of PC before you say stuff like that. Because it's very decentralized and there are many players everywhere who actually bring in value across the board for consumers out there. This is where we see a big problem. Everybody wants to hype up some console. A console is basically a cut down closed box cosplaying PC that has been given its own, custom operating system, locked down so that the player cannot gain external benefits, and then is sold to you at a subsidized cost so that they can upsell you on software, remasters, subscription, and all. This is why Xbox gamers are asking for a PC accessible layer on their Xbox. This is why PlayStation, when it in the PS3 era had its own, console come out, some of it had access to a Linux layer that players enjoyed so much that when they removed it, there was a class action lawsuit filed against PlayStation, according to some ordinary gamers, Mutahar, right? That they had to basically give those players some money as compensation because they had already gone ahead and advertised something like that. This is why console players are accessing PC via the Steam Deck. Stop saying things that are contrary to what reality is actually showing and depicting. This is not helpful in this conversation. Why would anybody say something like that on the internet when you have the capability to go around and look and read and hear what people are saying? The Steam Deck that all these folk had been talking about, it's not really that big. It just basically has sold close to 4 million units. Are we going to downplay it? And it's only sold through Valve. It's not, you can't find it on Best Buy. You can't find it on any retailers and so on and so forth. Valve has been testing the market and they've been seeing that gamers would prefer a device like that gives them access to a library, not necessarily wanting to go ahead and flex with power and all of that stuff. So once again, I think this is a misnomer when we take a look at what the market is really showing. PC is the dangerous, reality for consoles hegemony in gaming. And I thank God for that. And I'm happy that more and more we continue to see either advancements or mistakes as these PC companies start bringing technology our way. If they get greedy and foolish, they get exposed and they basically get abandoned. That's just the reality. People are mocking Nvidia all over the internet. They're mocking Nvidia like crazy. They don't want to mock the people who jumped in and bought the first set of Nvidias. I saw there's a content creator that was shouting and flexing, how PC gamers don't have the latest and the greatest, hardware and blah, blah, blah. And I was laughing because I'm like, because most of them are financially savvy about how they spend their money. So all this talk about Black Myth Wukong selling PlayStation's in China is a figment of your imagination. You are imagining it. There's no metric to prove that. If anything, I listened to what Yoshida said, where he said that the console market is really small there. And this is, again, contrary. You just said something contrary to what Shuhei Yoshida said. You got to understand, he was still at PlayStation when this game came out. Oh my gosh. Talk to me in the comment section, folks. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. Sometimes this is so hard to go through. Peace out.